How about this? Men are more oppressed than women.
Yeah, I don't agree with that.
You want to bite on that one?
You're really trying to
You're in the hot
cast a
seat.
line here, huh? Oh, man. I feel like there's... Yeah, okay. Sure. Why do you say that?
Well, I mean, you're talking about like rights and stuff, you know? So I can think of 3 examples of things that strictly impact men that don't really impact women. So first off, and this is immediately upon birth, why I would think men are more oppressed than women. So upon birth, the vast majority of men in this country are get circumcised, which I view as child genital mutilation. It's done without their consent. I am against it. Women are not having their lady bits circumcised in this country on birth. So that's a pretty major issue that I view that impacts, that's immediately upon birth, men are treated unequally to women. The next is forced military conscription. And I've said this before, I'll say it again. If we were to combine and add up all of women's collective grievances throughout all time, all the grievances, no right to vote, apparently you couldn't, there's something about bank accounts, couldn't have a bank account, inequality in the workplace, et cetera, unfair gender expectations, whatever. Put them all together, compare them to forced military conscription. I would argue that is a bigger grievance than all of women's collective grievances combined.
So circumcisions and draft?
No, just forced military conscription. And that's a bigger grievance, a bigger gender grievance than all of women's collective grievances.
And then what's your third?
No, I'm kind of veering off here and just saying like whatever the feminists want to say is a terrible grievance upon women. I'm coming and saying, well, actually, this one sole grievance experienced nearly exclusively by men is worse than all of your grievances combined together.
No, it's experienced just exclusively by men.
I mean, they're going to argue, well, in World War II, there was a Soviet sniper force of 1,000 women.
Yeah, no, but that would be the Soviet, though. So here in the United States, totally agree.
Well, I was even just arguing like worldwide when it came to military conscription. Almost all battles dating back thousands of years, it's men have been forced to go to war and die, and women haven't. And that is a bigger grievance. And you know what? I'll even say just World War I and World War II, the suffering that men exclusively endured in warfare is a bigger grievance than all of women's historical collective grievances combined.
That's crazy.
How's that crazy?
You don't think
Damn, that's crazy.
No, give me an example. I'll allow you to give me one example that's worse than forced military conscription. That women
in World War II.
Give me just military conscription. Give me one example.
Octopus Tetro donated $100. Brian, look to the scriptures of Christ and you will see the need of circumcision. When we look at what God himself wants from us, it's necessary. Malek, you're from a Muslim culture, but look to Jesus.
I mean,
Malek came from Orthodox Christianity, if I remember correctly.
Yes, I'm mixed. I'm also Armenian, and I grew up with Armenian culture, and Armenia was the first Christian nation, so I'm Christian.
I don't actually know what the Christian position is on circumcision. I don't know, Andrew, if you're able to weigh in on this, but
it's mixed. There's been a big fight about it, especially over the last 100 years. So I'm not gonna dive too much into that. You would need somebody who had more nuance of church affairs than me when it comes to circumcision. But yeah, there's a big fight about it even now.
Yeah, I mean, it occurs to me though, if you take a secular look at circumcision, you remove the religious component. I mean, on its own, it occurs to me that it's a rather barbaric practice.
I don't know.
But bringing it back to you, okay, state one gendered grievance that women have experienced that's worse than forced military conscription.
I mean, I guess the outcomes of going to war, the outcomes of like what happens with women and like cities that are invaded.
So Hillary Clinton in the 90s said something along the lines of, women are the primary I think she said women and children are the primary victims of war. Do you agree or disagree with that?
I think everyone's a victim of war, so no.
But everyone's a victim. But do you agree that women are the primary victims of war?
No.
Who are the primary victims of war?
I think all of the human species is.
No, who are the primary victims of war?
I have to name a man or a woman. That's my two options.
No,
like a group.
Well, so let me try to frame it better, make
Yeah.
it a little easier. If you had to choose
Yep,
which
there we go.
sex,
That's what I just
if
asked.
you had to choose which sex, would you say is men or women who are primarily affected by warfare?
This is crazy.
It's not crazy. You
Wait,
just don't.
no. Let her answer. Go ahead.
I'll say women.
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 Wait, so
And why?
Put it-
Why would you say that?
put women are what? Put it in your own words. Women are what?
The main victim of war.
Wait,
oh my
what?
God,
You
this
didn't
is
get
so-
what, Nick? You didn't.
That women are the main victim of war.
Why?
Okay.
How?
This is why people shouldn't go to get a master's degree. After the first
So
4 years.
why? I think Andrew was asking, why are women the primary victims of war?
Well, in the case I'm thinking of, World War II, and
Yeah, World War II. Sure. Let's use World War II. Okay.
like in Asia, for example, you have men who can fight. They have weapons. They're able to protect themselves. Let's say, yes, outcome of war, a lot of people die in both sides. There's a lot of cases where nothing can happen, like a nuke, for example, or a bomb. There's a lot of cases where I'm not saying this is generalized for everything, but they had competitions where they would go into villages and R-word the women, kill them after. This happened to like children in front of the mothers, things like that, which is
Okay, so let's assume that's true, right?
It is
Yeah,
true.
you're
Sure.
talking
No,
about
but-
you're talking about Nanking.
well, it didn't
Yeah,
just happen
it occurred
there.
to. Yeah, I thought she was talking about Vietnam, but
It
No,
happened
no,
in the
she's talking
Philippines
about-
too.
sure. Look,
World War
yes,
II,
but
Nanking.
in war, yes, okay. Let's say let's just agree with you. Yes, in war, rape occurs. Rape is terrible. It occurs. So your position is because rape occurs in war, women are the primary victims of war.
Well, I'm not saying that is like the only.
Let's say 100,000 women. I'm making up a number here. I don't know what the truth is. Let's say during World War II, 100,000 women were raped, and 20 million men were killed in World War II. Who's the primary victim of war
But it's
in
not
World War
just
II?
men dying in World War II. It's also women dying. They aren't just
The
getting
men are
R-worded.
forced to put
Wait.
their life on the line.
What You mean are you talking about civilian casualties
Yeah,
or
civilians, of course.
Okay, but now let's add on the 20 million military deaths. I might have my numbers wrong a little bit here, but so let's assume military deaths are like nearly exclusively male, like 99.99% male.
Okay.
Okay, so you have 20 million male military deaths versus let's exclude civilian populations because there's
Okay.
male civilian populations too. Let's just say only women are getting raped, right? 100,000 women get essayed. Who is the primary victim of war?
In the case you just described,
So let's say there's 20 million male deaths, military deaths, and then there's 100,000 women who are essayed, civilians.
okay.
Who's the primary victim of war?
In that case, men.
Okay, so you've just made a case for
If
all
you're cutting
war.
out civilian casualties to prove this
Which-
point,
Okay.
Yeah, well,
Then
but
men.
he can, especially since you're specifically looking at the United States. So, for instance, of the 292,000 members of the U.S. military who were killed by enemy fire, 16 of them total were female. 16
of the
from the
United States. Yeah.
Total. 16. from the United States for all of World War II, all of it.
Yep.
So who would you say then was the worst victim of war, for at least for the United States, if you just had to choose?
That's, yeah, the men.
The men. Now, if we were to go stat by stat, nation by nation, you're going to find something very similar to this. Because women, you may not know this, are actually usually protected in warfare conditions. Now, it is true that the communists did horrible things to their own population, the populations that they conquered. That is true. They did. The Russians especially. I mean, they went through Berlin, did horrific things to the women, but still predominantly the ones who suffered the most in even the European nations were men. I mean, just the casualty rates alone, as Brian is indicating, were overwhelmingly disproportionate. So knowing this new information, did you maybe want to change your answer?
What's the casualty rates on both?
On which, well,
On
I mean,
female and
you've
male.
already
Did you pull it up?
Female and you mean female soldiers?
No,
Or
I'm saying female civilians, anything.
civilians.
Yeah, if you want to know the disproportionate rate between the two, we can look those stats up for you as well. But under the assumption for a second that it is true that they were disproportionately male, because they were, would you then still concede? Or would you say, no, women are still the victims, the primary victims?
I never even agreed with that original point. You said you have to choose one. I said I think all humans are victims of war.
No, but wait.
Well, no. And then when you modified your answer, you said women, though.
You said
No,
women.
I modified it because you made me modify it. You said choose men or
well, yeah.
women.
Well,
But
what
you-
I did was I said if you had to choose between one sex or the other,
Yes.
which would you choose? You said women. So we're obviously asking that question so we can test your logic as to why you would pick women.
I chose that answer, and I said this is because of what goes on in war, the invasion of cities and things like that, where women will get attacked, SA'd,
And what
R'd.
What
and
happens to
hang
the
on,
men?
They will get SA'd, but sometimes up to 1/3 to 2/3 of the entire civilian population of men are put to the sword. And women usually don't have to deal with that problem. They get carried off as basically trophies, and they get to live. And the men
Not
get put on
necessarily.
spikes. That's what happens.
They don't allow them to live sometimes.
Sometimes that's true, but most of the time it's not true. Most of the time, when you're looking at the disproportionate rate of men versus women who are butchered in these massacres, it's still generally men. And the reason for that is because they don't want to leave an enemy at their back of possibly capable, able-bodied soldiers who could come after them. That's why that occurs that way.
I am saying in war, I think that what goes on with when they invade certain cities and villages, things like that, I think not being able to defend yourself is very scary, right? I think that makes them
Can't
victims.
defend themselves either, if it's a civilian population.
Yeah, of course, but
Good thing we're in the U.S.
And yet, so the men are the ones, though, that are usually gathered up and systematically exterminated first. It is true that women do have to experience things like SA and things like this, but generally, many times more of them are allowed to live.
Also, you brought up defending yourself, but earlier you said you're against guns.
Wait,
We're talking about
don't derail. Don't derail. Wait. So who's the primary victim of war?
oh my gosh. Can I say all humans again?
No, you have to.
Stand
you
on
have to pick.
business.
I guess we'll pick women.
We haven't made a convincing enough case to change your mind at all on this. I have a video. Let's pull up a video really quick. Nick, can you go to the private chat? Before you pull it up, let me just read two chats here. Maddie, can you read this one? Get it pulled up though if you can. It's in
I
the
definitely want
private
to
chat.
smell the chair now, but I know she's not down. I will offer a ring, land with the house, and bearing my seed. Any thoughts on Patrice O'Neill saying men are better than women?
I didn't say that. That was Patrice O'Neill who said that. I think we're all special.
Yeah.
We're all special.
We all have our strengths.
Patrice O'Neill had some hot takes. We have this one.
Celeste had an OnlyFans as vanity at its peak. Tits peak. She was conservative, but doesn't seem very conservative to me. Does she have natural tits, though?
Wow.
Celeste,
Did you have
an
an
OnlyFans?
OF?
No.
Oh.
That's.
Is the guy okay?
Who is that?
Not sure. Okay, last one, Maddie. Read this one.
Make women register for draft. Just because you are drafted does not mean frontline service. There is more support roles than combat roles.
Mm.
I'd agree to that.
Nick, why don't you pull up the video? This is super related. You can go ahead and play it. We'll only watch a little bit of it.
World War II. Oh my God.
The average lifespan of an American is 80 years. And an 80-year-old today
Nick, can
was
you put us
10
in the corner?
when World
right
War II
corner?
ended, 4 when it began. A soldier who saw battle would have to be in his late 80s, at least today.
Mm.
Generals, political leaders, the decision makers of the war, few are still
A
with
little
us.
louder.
And over the past few decades,
70.
we've seen authors and filmmakers rush to capture stories from
A
survivors
little louder.
before this
80.
connection of memory is lost.
Oh.
This project is not about individual war stories, and it's not about survivors. We're going to tally up the tens of millions of people whose lives were cut short by the war, and see how these numbers stack up to other wars in history, including trends in recent conflicts. We'll be counting soldiers and civilians separately. Each of these figures represents 1,000 people who died. Civilians were of
Nick,
all
sorry,
walks
could
of
you
life,
lower it a little? 70. Yeah.
whereas military deaths were almost entirely men.
Almost
The average
entirely.
age was about 23. In most battles, for every 1,000 soldiers killed, there are more than 1,000 who were injured.
Hide
The
us,
word
Nick.
casualty
Hide
can
us.
be confusing because in military speak, it often includes both deaths and injuries, and anything else that takes a soldier out of service.
You do
Here, we're just
right
counting
small.
the deaths. And we'll begin with American soldiers.
One of those
Over
is
400,000 died.
all men. All men.
Most of the deaths occurred in the European theater, fighting the Nazis.
Oh.
And about a quarter were in the Pacific, fighting the Japanese. When you put them on the timeline, you see that casualties were the heaviest at the end of the war. The war began on September 1st, 1939. But the U.S. wasn't willing to join the fight until Pearl Harbor,
Other side.
2 years in.
Hide us.
The deaths increased drastically on D-Day, when the Allies invaded Normandy. One of the most tragic moments of the war was on D-Day at Omaha Beach, where 2,500 Americans fell.
Male privilege, by the way.
So about the same number of U.S. soldiers died on this single beach landing as the entire
women stormed
13
the beach.
years of the recent war in Afghanistan. The bloodiest battle in the Pacific was Okinawa, which lasted 82 days, during which 12,500 Americans died. About 5,000 of these deaths were at sea from kamikaze attacks. Now let's look at some other countries, starting with Europe. Germany started World War II when it invaded Poland. Poland ultimately lost 200,000 soldiers in the war. Most died after the invasion while the country was occupied by Germany and the Soviet Union. Germany, meanwhile, lost just 16,000 in the invasion of Poland. The Nazis went on to invade and conquer other countries, including Denmark, Belgium, the Netherlands, France, Greece, and Yugoslavia. France surrendered, but after losing 92,000 soldiers in the Battle of France. Over 200,000 ultimately fell, which includes deaths in POW camps, French colonies, and other fighting. Yugoslavia suffered almost 500,000 military deaths. The initial invasion brought relatively few casualties on both sides, but the deaths mounted under Nazi occupation due to guerrilla fighting, civil conflict, and mass executions. The Nazi invasions were swift, with relatively few German losses. Even the Nazi commanders expressed surprise at their success. And then we have the United Kingdom and the United States, who were not invaded but took the fight to the Nazis. Britain lost about the same number of soldiers as the US, which includes the British colonies. Germany lost about 500,000 soldiers fighting the US and Britain in what is known as the Western Front, which took place in France and Belgium.
Other side.
But most Nazi soldiers died in the Eastern Front, Germany's unsuccessful invasion of the Soviet Union. The numbers are staggering.
Each one of those
The
is
most famous
1,000
battle of
people.
the Eastern Front, and perhaps the turning point of the European war, was Stalingrad. The German 6th Army successfully took Stalingrad, but then got surrounded by the Soviets and cut off from food and ammunition. 500,000 Nazis would ultimately die in Stalingrad. Another 100,000 were taken prisoner, of which 6,000 would ever return. POWs had a low survival rate throughout World War II, and it was particularly grim in the East.
You can pause it.
When you include these POWs,
All right. You want to revise your answer, maybe?
It didn't. It cut out the civilians immediately, though. Talking about civilians.
But okay, it also said all those military casualties were almost exclusively men.
Yes, in soldiers. Yeah, I never said it's not.
So men are disposable, is what you're saying?
No. Why would I say that?
Okay, so what if I told you there were? I don't know how to explain this. I thought that would have been helpful to show
like, why
you
are we watching this?
show you the scale of the military deaths
Yes.
that were experienced exclusively by men, as it stated in the video. That was not convincing to you at all. So your position is still women are the primary victims of war?
I thought you pulled up the video so you can show me how many civilian deaths there are as well. I thought was the point of the video.
Okay, here. I'll Google it. So, let's see.
Brian Gone Full Kook donated $100. You filter this, you're fake. Being essays is way worse. Often women raise Theoretika's
volume.
child. A constant reminder. Brian, would you rather be Australian dollars or die?
B.
S.
Oh, yeah. I would rather. I mean, this is a.
Well, come on.
I would rather live. No, I'd rather live.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there are some people. It's hard for them to live after it.
Sure. I'm not saying it's being essayed is a terrible thing.
Women can be victims.
Being
of
essayed
war,
is a
but-
terrible thing. But I would rather. I'm curious what the chat thinks. Nick, can you pull up the chat?
Oh, I don't want to see the chat. I don't know what they
Chat.
think.
The same scenario as you can.
Oh, it's moving.
Would you rather be? So your choice is live, or be essayed. Live or be essayed. I'd rather live and be essayed than just or have the choice of death.
Live.
I'd rather live. Like it would obviously suck. I would maybe have trauma, but I would get I would try to move on with my life.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I'm not saying look, essay's terrible, but so your argument.
Well, wait, hang on. What if it was essayed by a woman though?
That's actually does add an interesting. Well, I mean, I'd still rather live.
Why is that interesting?
I would still no, but it's interesting because his thing was, well, you're essayed by someone of your same sex.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of, but.
So that changes the spectrum around, doesn't it? So like I would take death before I took the essay by a male, but would not take death before I took the essay by the female, right?
Damn, this is getting deep.
Really deep.
Well, I think.
Wait,
So
Andrew, you would rather die?
Yes.
I mean, look, it ain't ideal, but I want to keep on living.
No, I get it. I understand. You know what I mean?
Wait,
there's
but Andrew,
there's
you
no
have
right answer to the question.
But Andrew, you have
It's
kids.
just a
Wouldn't?
preference.
But Andrew, you have kids. So like, is that your genuine answer?
It's sad that they're going to have to be orphans, you know.
What the fuck?
I'm sorry. If I had to choose,
really dark.
that's it. But the thing is, though, is that if you add in the dynamic of if it's SA by a woman. Wouldn't that be far more preferable? And so then you add
This is
totally
a
different
no
questions
in between
suddenly, right?
these cheeks.
Well, okay, so wait, Andrew, let me double down on this. Okay, so Hulk Hogan as a woman,
Oh, man.
or like trans Megan Fox.
I think I could deal with the whatever female. It doesn't matter as long as it's an actual female. I think I could deal with it. But no, I don't.
Hulk
think
Hogan
that
female.
Yeah, I think if it's the question of give me penis or give me death, it's I'm taking the death note on this one. I'm sorry.
I'm still living. I'm living in either. So okay, your position is what again? I don't know.
You want me to repeat it for like?
Why not?
Women were the primary.
Are women the primary
Women,
victims
primary
of war?
victims. I don't agree with that wording, but yes.
Anybody agree? Are women the primary
No,
victims
they're not
of
going
war?
to agree. That's
No,
all
they
right.
might. You never know.
Oh, I could hear.
Uh,
I'd like our Chilean. Do you want to weigh in on this?
No.
No.
C. Okay. All right. Oh, you had something?
No.
Malik?
Malik.
Oh, my
No,
bad.
I don't.
Okay. Let's do a couple chats then. I don't know if we're going to be able to convince her. Andrew, I don't know if you had any further back and forth on the war thing. Women are the primary victims of war, according to her.
Yeah,
So
well,
crazy to me.
She's kind of revised her answers a little bit. So let's try to take the charitable approach instead.
Hold on.
Sisyphus donated $100. Listen, Brian, I get your point about battlefield deaths, but to some extent you are still expressing some agency in the whole ordeal. Men wake up every day to protect and provide for their family.
I'm
Well,
not
then
really
I
sure
guess-
I understand the argument.
I think
there.
he's saying it's like, if that's the argument, it's like the duty, right?
The
If
duty.
If you're on the side of traditional and
Brian Fulcook donated $100. Brian, essay by man. It's such an intrusion for a woman by a man. And you must raise the attacker's child.
Yeah, living is still preferable over. Living is always going to be more preferable.
what about if they attacked your children and did stuff to your children and then let you live?
What?
What? So
Where?
confused.
It's
Yeah,
like.
well, I mean, but they're also doing that to a man's child, and then let them live, right? So what? I don't understand the argument. The argument is, well, what if they did this to our kids? It's like, well, it's our kids, right? My kids too. So then, wouldn't the man also have to deal with the same trauma?
He
Wait.
wouldn't be able to witness it in person.
Really quick, I just want to address Sisyphus really quick. I think just because men have an instinct to provide and protect for their family doesn't mean, like, for example, Vietnam is not viewed as like a righteous war historically or in current day. So a man who got drafted to, for example, Vietnam, you can perhaps make the case that World War II was a bit more righteous, but a man who was drafted to go to Vietnam, what were we doing in Vietnam? I don't know. Like,
Can I?
Well, we were busy getting netted in by the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which turned out to be a complete and total fraud. But anyway,
But-
that aside,
but there was no. When it came to Vietnam, it's like, what are we doing there?
yeah.
It's
Yeah, I
their,
get it, but-
it's their internal conflict. I don't know.
But this
ask a
moves it
question?
back to the point though here. So I'm going to try to do the most charitable thing that I can do.
Let's go.
And try to
Need
see it from your perspective. So if the perspective is that women are more oppressed during war than men are, you would agree with me that women are not going to be the ones fighting the actual war. So the ramifications of this are going to be situational. They're going to be based on things like food, possibilities of SA, things like this, not direct death, generally.
Generally, yeah.
Yeah, generally. So then the question does come down to what Brian is asking, which is it preferable for a woman or a man to be SA'd or for the life to be taken? This does become then the pertinent question in the hypothetical. So the question to you is, which one do you think is preferable for most people?
No idea.
None? You think that if most people had to choose between SA or death, that they would choose death?
Your entire point is based on SA being worse than death.
Right.
Well, I wasn't saying, no, that's not my point at all. I think SA is a part of war and part of what happens to women, but there's other things that also happen to women.
I also
Well,
think
what are worse? What are worse things that
like
happen
I
to
said,
women than that?
witnessing sometimes the mental, witnessing some things like that happen to your family members as well.
How would that be worse than men who are witnessing their best friends getting their faces blown off in a war?
They're getting drafted with their best friends.
Oh my God.
Sometimes, yes. And if they're not,
No, like
they make
they're going
best
on the
friends.
battlefield
Hang
with
on,
their
hang on.
buddies.
They
They're
make
choosing.
best-
They might
JoJo,
become friends.
yeah.
They
A
make
lot of people
friends
join the
with who
military
they're
together.
in the field with. So the question is how is that less traumatic than watching the men around you getting mowed down by machine guns?
I mean, and you also have to understand too, like, because you made the counter argument of, you know, if it was your child.
Chris donated $100. Andrew, why would you mention the Gulf of Tonkin? I guarantee you that the girls think that the Gulf of Tonkin is a cocktail.
Oh, also last
I
thing.
don't think so. I think Malik knows what it is. You know what it is, right, Malik?
Sure.
Shit. Oh, just last thing.
You have
really
no
quick.
fucking idea, do you, Malik? You know, I was going to give you credit, and then you ruined everything.
I believe I do, but I don't want to guess for sake of sounding like an idiot if I'm wrong.
All right, fair enough.
Also, just really quick, just on the Sisyphus thing, him saying men wake up every day to protect and provide. Again, like I mentioned, Vietnam War, also the Iraq War. You know, you've got the military-industrial
Big
complex.
Sass Energy donated $100. Civilian men are the primary targets from an invading army. The first and most likely to be dispatched because they are most capable of violent resistance. SA happens, but is minuscule in comparison.
That is correct. So this is an overarching historical theme as well, that generally occupied nations, the first thing that is done is either the young men are compressed into service of the occupier, enslaved in service of the occupier, or outright exterminated. The reason for this is because it eliminates resistance of the people who can resist. Generally, women are not exterminated, but are carried off instead as trophies, or you know, some other thing happens. But generally, they're not taken out. It's usually young men who are taken out.
Okay.
Here, in this scenario, let's say that in a military conflict, not using any specific one, in a military conflict, 20 million men die in the conflict and 1 million women are SA'd. Which is worse?
20 million dying.
Okay, so let's just assume that that's the case for all World War I and World War II. Those are the stats.
We're
So
assuming, yes.
you think it's higher?
I don't know, but
I don't-
I'm not talking about SA and just SA. I'm talking about death as well. I'm talking about all of that.
Well,
It's
Okay.
all
Yeah, but
encaptured in.
so all of these conditions, though, are shared, except this one condition generally. So almost every condition that you're talking about is a shared condition. Starvation would be a shared condition of the populace. If you're talking about watching loved ones die, that would be a shared condition of the populace. All of these would be shared conditions with the exception of this one thing, which is SA. That's why we're narrowing in on it. Because anything that you would attribute to a thing bad happening to a female population would be the same exact bad thing that would be happening to the men of that population as well.
I mean, but wouldn't it kind of somewhat be considered shared? Because it's like the point I was trying to make is that in her argument, she was saying that in the sense of children being a part of that group, the men wouldn't be there to witness it, so it wouldn't be as harsh on them as it would be for the women and the
To
children.
witness.
Well, it could be worse,
The SA.
actually. Imagine
that
if
was
you're
the
in
point.
combat. Imagine if you're in combat and you get a letter that says, "Hey, your children were slaughtered by the enemy." And you weren't
Yes.
even there because you were in the front lines. I think that in some ways that might even be worse.
That was the point I was trying to make, is that, you know, coming home, and it's like, if you get the chance to come home to find out, you know, your family's gone, whether it be mother, wife, sister, children, whoever, you know, would that entail a worse response and make that more of a reasonable victimhood than this essay itself? That's just hot take.
Well, I don't know. There's not, with what you're talking about here, there's not a right or a wrong answer.
There isn't.
Right.
You know what I mean? At least in this particular instance. But there is a right answer, I think, when it comes to death versus SA and warfare and who's targeted and who's affected more. And it's very clear that men are affected far more by warfare between nations than women are. Women are the protected class, and so are children. That's why men go to do the fighting, and that's why generally they do it away from their homelands, because they want to protect the women. If their homeland is occupied, it's usually the young men who get put to the sword and not the women, who instead are considered trophies. There's a reason why when Vikings conquered different areas, they put the men to the sword and took the women with them. The women got to live.
Are women the primary victims of war?
Forcibly, they got to live under the capture of new people in that case scenario.
Yeah, but wouldn't that be better than the alternative of death? That's the question.
That's more of, again, that would depend on your own mentality of like what you define living is.
Let's remove all hypothetical scenarios. Let's just look at World War II. I don't know the extent of your knowledge on World War II, but whatever you know that there's been significant military casualties, and it's over 20 million. They're all men. Given that you know that, in World War II, who would you say was the primary victim of war, men or women?
Of the U.S. men.
No. Just globally.
Based off of what I know from World War II.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can't. It's just I don't know any of the statistics around it. I said women initially, so I'm going to say women.
Okay. What about World War I? Who's the primary victim of war in World War I?
I'll just stick with women.
Women? How about just all war? If we just add up all the wars together, who's the primary victim of war in general?
I don't think either gender should be who's more victimized. I think in war everyone's a victim, so I don't even.
But
someone has it worse?
Who is the primary victim of war? That's the question.
Can I ask?
Hold on, no. Hold on. Go ahead.
Think of it from your progressive values of intersectionality during warfare. Right? Just think of it as intersectionality during warfare, and then you can determine who's the most oppressed based on all sorts of contributing factors, which we can make up to find which sex is the most oppressed during war.
During war.
Who is the primary victim?
I said women. I'm going to stick with women.
Globally throughout all time, who is the primary victim of war, men or women?
I'm going to say women.
Okay.
Why?
Okay.
And it's based off all the points I already made.
So let's say if I mean I don't even know.
Can I bring up a similar example? So if there's a murder case, okay, forget about war. If someone's murdered, all right, and just say the same person who murdered that man, he had a girlfriend and a kid back at home, and now they're single, and she's the single mom because her boyfriend or husband was just murdered. Who's the victim in that scenario?
In the scenario of
that someone got murdered, and now there's a single mom raising a kid alone.
That's actually good.
And I can't say both are the victim.
Who's the victim?
Everyone. I think they're both victims.
No. Hold on. Okay. So if I have this right, your question to her is, do you have a brother?
Yes.
Okay. Your brother gets murdered.
Wow.
Who's the primary victim of him being murdered?
My brother.
Is that your answer, or are you asking a question?
My brother is
your
the
brother's
victim.
the primary victim. It's not your.
But you're also a victim.
But right?
I think my family members are also victims.
What if let me ask you a question.
But the primary victim is your brother. Why would your brother be the primary victim?
let's say you even witnessed the murder. Who is the primary victim?
I'm confused about this point, how it correlates to the last
It's
point.
kind of related, but hold on. So, okay. You witness your brother being murdered. Who's the primary victim?
My brother, yeah.
But you witnessed it. I assume it was traumatic.
Of course it was, and I'm a victim, and I have to live on being a victim.
But you had
Well, which was preferable, like from the standpoint of you?
If
That
me
you're still
witnessing
alive?
or
Isn't
is
it
more
preferable that you're still
victimized?
alive in this instance?
so which one's more preferred? Witnessing, I guess. Depends.
Yes.
Depends if I can.
Natalia, I think that was actually a very good.
Yeah,
that was a
now-
very good way to
now
frame it.
multiply that by like a couple million.
Look, I don't know if we're gonna be able to convince her, boys.
Yeah, I think we're
She's a tough
tried.
one.
Yeah.
I want you. Who's driving back? Because I know it's you.
We're not going to make it.
Done for.
Wait, you.
I
We're
drive.
all driving together.
Oh, you guys all drove
I'm
together?
driving by myself.
I don't know her.
Oh no, I'm.
You can come if you
No,
want.
it's you guys are friends, right? You all who's driving? Oh, her.
Jojo is.
I was gonna say maybe one of you drive, and then I think this is on Netflix. Have her watch All Quiet on the Western Front while driving back, and then she can, after seeing the barbarism and brutality of war, maybe you might think, oh, maybe it was the men who had it a little rougher. Saving Private Ryan. Watch the first scene of Saving Private Ryan. That's a good one. But the whole All Quiet on the Western Front movie on Netflix, very good.
Saving Private
Yeah,
Also
but you have to
do a new
understand
age.
that women were riveting screws into pieces of sheet
Oh,
metal,
yeah,
and
yeah.
so it's equal. It's, I mean, you can see that riveting screws into sheet metal and dealing with bloody wounds is the same as storming the beaches of Normandy. Now that might seem absurd to the average man who's out there listening, but who cares? It's really it's how we feel. It's, and the things that give you the ick. Ultimately. That's the ick is how we feel. That's how we're going to do society.
I'm shocked this is coming from you as well, because you said you rather die than be R-worded.
Yeah, by my own sex.
Yeah, so
But he prefer nice beefy
because
women.
he finds he does
Yeah,
he would
there's
rather
a
die than be
distinction,
violated.
I think, between men in SA and women in SA.
So you think
there's a distinction to be made under preference. And in this particular condition, I'm not even sure most men would agree with me. It's just my preference is that I would rather take the bullet than that.
all right.
Take a woman's bullet than a man's bullet.
I have a question for you. How do you say your name again? What's your first
Jojo.
name? Jojo. How many women do you think have had trench foot?
Oh my god.
I know this, trench foot. What about like mustard gas? World War I. Just a little, 9 months in the trenches. A little 9 months, just a little casual 9 months in the trenches. A little mustard gas. A little trench foot.
How many women did you say died in World War II? Like
None,
15?
No, there were no. I feel like I read there was some Russian or Soviet or no. Wait, there was. Well, I know in World War II there was like a small group of Soviet female soldiers, but there might have been a really small something in World War I. But
That amount.
She's like, that one.
Jojo, all of your points are, but the women were sad, but how'd the women feel? The men are dead. They don't even get the right to feel. They're dead.
dead.
Yes, the woman felt.
They're dead.
The woman felt immense trauma.
Oh my God.
The woman felt immense trauma at watching horrible things happening to their children or themselves. But the men are dead. They don't even get the opportunity to have an opinion on it.
Or imagine
Jojo.
This is a matter of opinion, and if you can live with that kind of.
Her opinion. Women are
Jojo, you have to
oppressed.
promise me you're gonna go watch Saving Private Ryan and All Quiet on the Western Front. I think that one's available on Netflix. If you haven't, you have to promise me you're gonna watch it after the show. The last thing on the war thing, and then we're gonna move on.
Have you seen Tales of a Geisha?
Let me. Bro, what? Okay.
That's also,
Are you familiar with the current conflict in
It's
Ukraine?
also about World War II, but it's about women. The women's side.
The women were sad that their husbands died.
Sad.
Yeah, they were sad. At home.
Are you familiar with the
comfy.
Ukraine conflict?
Yes.
Were they putting screws in sheet metal in the movie?
I mean, you guys could watch it.
Okay. So if
You
I
give
were
me
to,
homework, I'll
hang on,
give you
hang on.
homework.
Did you actually watch the movie?
What? The Tales of a Geisha? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, what was it about?
Just the war stories of like
Yeah.
4 different women, and then
Name a single female character from the movie.
I haven't seen it in years. I saw it when I was young.
A single character, just one.
I don't remember.
Don't remember?
oh my god.
All right.
Okay. It's
Can
okay,
you,
Birdie.
does a scene stand out? Is there a scene you can give me from the movie that stands out to you?
Of Tales of a Geisha, yeah. She was protecting her children in it with.
Who
They
was?
had a travel. I don't remember the character names. I don't remember.
Oh, okay. All right. Go ahead.
They had to travel a long distance to avoid the soldiers who were raiding the villages in our wording.
Many miles.
Is this where you got your knowledge on the war about from that movie?
That is a diabolical
You should be
laugh.
wearing this shit, not me.
Did they manage to escape?
I deadass feel like all of your knowledge on the war was from that movie now. That you just mentioned that.
This is gonna be the craziest drive home ever.
Speaking about drive home, it's a little bit late.
Okay. Let me read here, Madison. Can I have you read this